Many organizations don't realize that when an employee leaves a company, regardless of who initiated the separation, there are steps that accounts payable must take immediately. We're going to review them all. Stick around until the end when we share some tactics you can use if HR refuses to notify AP of employee departures in a timely manner. And this happens more frequently than you might imagine. Welcome to Accounts Payable Sound Bites, the program where we share tips and explain simple and complex accounts payable issues in short, concise sound bites. Okay, so typically when an employee quits or leaves the company or is invited to leave, whatever the story is, HR will sit down with the employee, not always HR, but someone, and they'll retrieve the key to the office, assuming there is one, a key to the building, a name badge if there is one, company credit cards, and sometimes they'll conduct an exit interview. Now, that's not all that needs to be done, even though from an HR perspective, it might seem like that is all that needs to be done. Accounts payable actually has some tasks that they need to undertake. Number one, they need to ascertain whether that person is an authorized signer. And by an authorized signer, we mean they can sign checks, but also they can initiate payments. They can approve payments, they can release payments, basically anything to do with your bank account and your money. If they are, the bank must be notified and they must be taken off so that they can't initiate any transaction after they've left the organization. You also need to determine what cards they have. Now you might say, well, HR got the cards back. And that's true, but they also must be canceled with the bank, because if they are not, and if you just get the card back, if the employee was not the most honorable, they could have written down the card number, the expiration date, and that magic 3 or 4 digit code, and then they can go shopping to their heart's content on the internet. Before you say, oh, that would never happen, or our employees would never do that, or we just take the money out of their last paycheck. A few things. Number one, a few of them have done that. It's happened. And number two, most states will have laws that will prevent you from taking that money out of their last paycheck, especially if you gave them the last paycheck when they left. You don't have that ability, if you will. Also, you want to close off their access to the ERP system so they can't get online and play all sorts of games, which, most of the employees won't do, but you only need to have it happen once, and that will cause havoc. Okay, now, before we discuss HR notifying AP about employee departures in a timely manner, which unfortunately does not happen all the time, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to this channel. It's completely free, private, and you can unsubscribe at any time. Also, if you ring that bell next to the subscribe button, you'll be notified when we post new accounts payable content, which we do 2 or 3 times a week. And by the way, you don't need to have a YouTube account to subscribe. You can subscribe if you have a Gmail account. Okay, so let's dive down into the issue of HR. Does HR notify AP in a timely manner at your organization? AP needs this because they need to cancel the cards, and they don't know when to cancel the cards or not if no one tells them to cancel them. And they also need to remove that necessary personnel from the various signing authorities that we described earlier. Also, although AP doesn't necessarily do this, it's probably more apt to be happening in accounting. That person's access to the ERP system, as we said, needs to be canceled. Now, what do you do if HR doesn't notify you? And I have to tell you, this happens at more than a few organizations. And in fact, if your company is one of the ones that doesn't notify you, maybe you could indicate that in the comment section so people don't feel like, oh, it's just us. So what can you do? HR doesn't notify you. Well, what you can do is on a regular basis, and by a regular basis, I mean monthly or even weekly if you're at a very large organization, get a copy of your active employees. Okay, nobody should have a problem with giving you a copy of your active employees. Then you get a copy from the bank of your active card holders, compare the 2 lists, and if somebody has a card but they're not an active employee, then you want to deactivate that card. That's number one. Number 2, you want to take that active employee list and make sure anyone who has signing authority of any sort or authorization related to your payments is on the active employee list. If they're not, you might want to do a little research, but you want to do it pretty quickly and then get them off the list. Also, if you put your employees in the master vendor file for purposes of expense reimbursements, You want to check who's in the master vendor file for expense reporting purposes and who's on the active employee list. If you have someone in your master vendor file who's no longer on the employee list, you want to deactivate them in the master vendor file. The last thing you want to do is slip through an expense report. Now, if they've got a last expense report that they're going to submit after they've left, you need to coordinate that with their particular manager. And again, even though AP doesn't normally do it, you might want to talk to the appropriate person in accounting to make sure their ERP access is closed off, because you don't want that game playing. Are you using all the newest best practices to help protect your organization against the scourge of fraud? Episode 67 describes those practices that everyone should be using. A link to that episode should appear to the left on YouTube. And in closing, I just want to say I really do appreciate those thumbs up, those shares, those subscribes, and those comments.